me today is Gina Dalfonzo. She is a writer and editor whose work has appeared at Christ in Pop Culture. She also publishes the Substack Dear Strange Things, which I recommend. She is the author of the books One by One, Welcoming the Singles in Your Church, and Dorothy and Jack, The Transforming Friendship of Dorothy L. Sayers and C.S. Lewis. She is the editor of The Gospel in Dickens and her new book, The Screen in the Mirror, What Movies Show Us About Ourselves, the World, and God, was just released, and I highly recommend it. Gina, thank you so much for talking with me today. I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be talking with you.
I really enjoyed this book. I love the fact that when I was growing up in my little Baptist church, movies were really hands off. And now there are so many great books about films and faith. And I just read Jeffrey Overstreet's Lost and Found in the Cathedral of Cinema. So this was another great one to add to that. I really enjoyed this. I highly recommend people get the book, and we will tell people where they can do that shortly. But Gina, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
I feel like I've known you online for years because I think we first connected on the Christ and Pop Culture group. Mm-hmm. And so I've loved seeing how your career has flourished. I was really excited when I heard you were going to be writing this book. So tell us a little bit about the book.
Well, this is my first book about movies, which is kind of funny because I've been writing about movies for a very long time at Christ and Pop Culture and all kinds of other places. I've loved movies for a long time. And so when I was sort of looking around for projects to do, and it was just an idea that came to me, something to do with movies, what they do for us, what we get out of them, how they shape us, and so forth. And it was this idea that just sort of, I got this little germ of an idea. It sort of grew, developed, and turned into this idea about how watching a movie in a way is like looking in a mirror. And fundamental to the premise is that we always automatically want to identify ourselves with the heroes. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing because we all need inspiration, but also when we're always identifying ourselves with the heroes, we tend to lose sight of our own flaws, problems, issues that need worked on. And so I thought, let's try and take another approach to movies here. Let's try looking at some movies that have some very flawed characters and holding that mirror up to ourselves and saying, okay, what am I seeing here that reflects who I am, and maybe that image can start to shape and change who I am in a better way. So that it was just this little idea I had that I wanted to experiment with, and it turned into this book.
It's a great read. The great thing about this is half of the book, I felt like, oh, I'm revisiting movies I love, like The Godfather and Network and Chinatown and Knives Out. And then I'm a critic, but I have a horrible gap on older movies. So it was great to be like, oh, I need to get around to Gaslight. Oh, I haven't seen Vertigo in years. I need to go back to that one. It was great to read that and be like, okay, now I have a backlog of lists I need to check out. When you start reviewing movies, you get so deluged in what's out right now that you get this whole backlog that you never go back and fill out. So I'm looking forward to adding to that list. You mentioned you love movies. What drew you to movies in the first place, and what are some of your favorites?
Oh gosh, I'd have to go back to I don't know, when I was 3 or 4. It seems like they've always just been there. I mean, and this will date me, I can remember back before, right before the VCR era started, when you had to go to the movie theater. And then VCRs, came in when I was I don't know, maybe 5 or 6. My dad got, one of those old Beta machines. And so we had that for a while, and, taping movies off the TV. And so then there was the idea, oh, I can have a movie at home and watch it over and over again. And I got really into that because I like being able to do that. I love to be able to reread books, and I love to be able to rewatch movies. So I grew up with them. Just always been into them. It was somewhere along the way, as I became a writer, it was a real pleasure to find out that I could write about them. And so, yeah, so they've just sort of always been there. I've been into older movies for a long time. And yeah, Singing in the Rain is, I think I mentioned in the book, is my all-time favorite. I discovered that when I was around 11 or 12. And I love a lot of the Hitchcocks, Notorious, Rear Window. I love Casablanca. Who doesn't love Casablanca?
Oh yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, I have some newer favorites, but a lot of the classics are among my very favorite.
Singing in the Rain is one of those. It's kind of my go-to sick day movie
Yes.
because it's so impossible to watch that and not be in a good mood. A few years ago, we were doing a movie night with our kids, and my son had to have been he was probably about 10, which would have put my daughter about 6. And my wife was asking me what we wanted to watch that night, and I suggested Singing in the Rain. And we had a bit of an argument because she's like, I don't think the kids are going to sit through that. They're not going to like that. So I got overruled that night.
Mhm.
But about a month later, my wife went out of town, and I kind of told the kids, okay, this is what we're doing. We're watching Singing in the Rain tonight. Gangbusters. They loved that. I mean, that is every age loves that movie. So
Yeah, there's just something about it. It's just, I mean, I mean, to this day, it can still put me in a good mood. But like the first time it was just like euphoria. I mean,
mhm.
you're like walking on air. It's just extraordinary the power of a movie like that can have.
When did you start writing about film? When was the point where you're like, oh yeah, this is something I can write about. I have something to say on these.
That's a good question. And I don't remember exactly, but it's been a long time. And I think that when I started out, I was much more kind of in didactic mode because, which, is I don't see as such a great thing now, but it was sort of what in the Christian film world at that point, or just maybe in the evangelical world in general, that was the tone that
Oh
that I
yeah.
had heard, and so it was the tone that I sort of mirrored. And the more I grew and read and watched movies and looked at criticism, I was like, oh, okay, it doesn't have to be like that. I can just
Mhm.
actually like write about movies like in a different way. I mean, I'm still talking to an extent about what we learn from movies and what they give us, but it's not in the same way. It's not like the plugged in sort of focus on the family type mode.
The swear counters
Like
and yeah,
there are this many curse words or whatever.
yeah.
It's more like, these are cultural artifacts that we make because of the creative instinct that we have
Mhm.
that reflects who we are, we learn from that, we grow from that, but also there's just so much beauty, there's so much to enjoy, there's so much to love, and have a little fun with it.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's great. And it's definitely like again, I grew up in those plugged in atmospheres. Grew up Baptist church and they were, the swear counters, things like that. And it's been fun to watch even in the last 20 years as I've paid more attention to film criticism and film writing. The number of people coming from Christian backgrounds who are starting to have that different approach now to be, hey, I'm curious about this movie instead of wanting to see how I can use this to tell others how to live. What's it provoking in me?
Yes.
What's that spark it's hitting? And
Yeah.
coming to the movies with curiosity.
Yeah, it's just like you said, instead of thinking about how you can use it.
Hmm.
That's a sort of that's a sort of trap that so many of us fall into and then spend a long time climbing out of. And
Hmm.
I'm still kind of, I think, trying to be conscientious about that because I was in it for a while.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I think I learned, well, from all kinds of places, but like C.S. Lewis's An Experiment in Criticism comes to mind for one example, just about how not to use things, how to take them for what they are, and then and then see what you absorb from that and how it affects you. But to stay away from thinking of it as a transactional thing or a disposable thing or product, that kind of thing.
So with the book, the thing that I really thought was fascinating was this idea you had about seeing ourselves in the movies. I'm a big fan of Roger Ebert, and I love his phrase that movies are machines that generate empathy, and movies have helped me see people who are unlike me a little clearer. They've really worked on my empathy and helped me be a little more compassionate. But maybe it's self-preservation and deflection, but I hadn't really thought much about the fact that I can probably understand myself better through a movie. And I think that's such a great way to take, especially looking at maybe the more unsavory sides of ourselves through a movie. I'm really curious, was there a film that crystallized that for you where you're like, oh yeah, I see myself in this. This movie is working on me and kind of churning it up. I know you talk in the book about Amadeus and how that one affects you very personally. But
Yes.
was there a moment where you're like, oh, there's enough here that I want to pull at this thread, and there are more movies that I bet I can find?
It's funny. The movie that I think of when you ask that is a movie that did not actually make it into the book. Well, only very briefly. And that is Hitchcock's Strangers on a Train. Still want to write about that, but but I didn't because I ended up finding so many others that I wanted to write about, and that sort of receded into the background. But it did get me on that train of thought, pardon the pun. I had watched the movie, quite a few times. And for those who don't know it, it's about two men who meet by chance on a train, and one of them is kind of psycho. It's Hitchcock, so and he comes up with the idea that they're talking, and the one guy is like, you have somebody in your life you can't stand. I have somebody in my life I can't stand. We should swap murders.
Hmm.
I should murder your person. You should murder mine. Then nobody will be able to trace it. And so the other guy thinks he's berserk, and he actually is. But so everything follows from there. So Hitchcock's version keeps the one guy innocent, like he's an innocent guy just caught up in this psycho's manipulations. The book, which I checked out later, the original book by Patricia Highsmith, is very different. And it actually has the innocent guy is not so innocent there. He really gets sucked in, gets his hands dirty, does bad things. And so I was somewhere in the process, I was just thinking about it's my instinct, as maybe I guess it was Hitchcock's, to like want to keep one character good, and so like have him like stay clear of the fray, and then have that contrast between good and evil and all that. But Highsmith saw it differently, and I guess I got thinking like, so what if you were this guy tempted by the psycho? Would you be able to stand up to him, or would you fall? And thinking about all these things, I think that's what planted the seed of the idea in me in the first place. So someday I probably will have to write about that, just because it's a very fertile field to write about.
Yeah, no, I would definitely read that. I don't know if I've seen Strangers on a Train. I have seen Throw Mama from the Train, which I believe is a remake of that as well. But I will have to add Strangers on a Train. Hitchcock is one of those guys who I feel like, oh yeah, no, I've seen all the big ones, but there's a lot of ones that kind of go pass by.
Yeah, some of his minor ones are just absolute gems. Stage Fright is one of my very favorite Hitchcocks, and like so many people haven't even heard of it because it's just a very minor movie that he made in between a lot of the big ones. But it's really, really good. And and Alastair Sim, who's best known for playing Ebenezer Scrooge, plays a father character with an accordion, and he's so cute. It's just he's so funny, and I just love that movie so much. So add that to your list
I
too.
will add that. The movie that kept coming up to me as I was reading this and thinking, have I seen myself in a movie? especially those kind of unsavory sides. I keep going back to Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, which
Oh,
is
that's so
I,
interesting.
I wrote about that a few years ago for a book, and it stuck with me because I always approached it thinking, Steve Martin was the hero, John Candy's kind of the lout, and you watch that again, and I am watching going, oh. No, I'm kind of Steve Martin. I'm not just annoyed. I have this tendency to look down on someone, to think myself better than someone, and above, kind of the kind of loutish behavior that John Candy has, where John Candy's character is really lovable and overly talkative. And it was funny to watch that, thinking, oh no, this is a good time movie, and then to see kind of my pricklier parts on screen, and how that movie is about how he kind of gets sanded down by being around John Candy.
Yeah.
So I love that you're taking this approach to say, how can we see ourselves in the movies? Because I think sometimes entertainment is that nice little. It's easier, we're going to be more open, I think, sometimes to see ourselves in entertainment than maybe to hear a sermon that convicts us.
Mhm.
We're going to feel a little more resistant to hearing that, whereas a movie kind of comes in a little bit softer.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you had a particular movie that came to mind for you as you were reading it, and I hope other readers will do the same thing, because it's an approach that can be that you can take to like all kinds of movies and all kinds of situations and all kinds of characters. And so I hope different people will see different movies and different aspects in it.
Now, you set the bar very high for yourself. You are writing about movies in this book that are considered literally on lists of the greatest movies in the world. So Vertigo, for years, and you write about that, was the number one movie from critics in one of the year's Sight and Sound list. The
Hmm.
Godfather, largely considered one of the greatest American movies ever made. Amadeus. You're approaching like movie royalty in these. Was it intimidating at all to be like, hey, I'm going to approach these books, I keep saying that, these movies that have been beloved for decades and have been written about so much? Was there a factor that made you be like, oh, maybe I should write about something someone hasn't seen? Or how did you say, okay, I'm going to find a new approach to this one?
Oddly enough, I did not find it daunting because precisely because so many people have written about some of these great movies. I felt like, well, I'm just one more voice in the choir, you know. I have my own take, and if somebody doesn't like my take, they can go out and find another take, and that's okay. I'm just one more small voice chiming in here. These movies are so great. They're so beloved. They've been written about so much that they can take one more person writing about them. So yeah, I think maybe if I were writing about lesser known ones, I might feel more anxiety about getting it right, because like not many people have seen this. I want to make sure I do it justice. I want to make sure I do it right. Whereas the greats are just the opposite. I'm just one more person coming along to add my take to so many.
But you find original takes on too, which I think is really great. I mean, I've read so many books about The Godfather and the making of it, and this was a take to see family as idolatry and be like, oh, yeah, that is there. That's all there, and I've never heard it expressed in this way. And so it was really really refreshing to come to these movies with a new perspective.
Thanks. Yeah, that one I really liked doing that one. It felt personal to me in a couple of ways. One, because I am Italian American, and and so there was a lot in there that not the crime family stuff, but a lot of other things that resonated with me. And and then the whole family angle. I think and you and I talked a minute ago about growing up in a church background at this
Hmm.
particular moment in time. Family first is such a sort of rallying cry,
Sure.
and like everything is family, family, family. And so as a single woman, I've had to figure out my own way to sort of deal with that. I wrote a book about it, as you said, and just to sort of find my own place and maintain my own place in the church where everything is family all the time. And it was fascinating to me to look at The Godfather and see, oh yeah, family values there too. Only they're showing that family can be misused,
Hmm.
family can be used to manipulate you. When you put family first, but um, you don't have a vision of the higher good, the bigger picture, the way your family fits into the whole society and culture, and everybody's there to sort of help each other. When you don't have that, then family can become an idol, and family you can wind up sacrificing your family for the sake of family, which is the tragic irony of
Hmm.
Michael Corleone's whole life. So I just found so much in there, and I just I just dove in. I had a great time working on that one.
Now, as we've hit on, these are not always bright and happy movies with very strapping good heroism. These are sometimes dark movies, and you mentioned in your introduction those aren't movies you usually turn to, correct?
Yeah, it's true. I don't like seek out the really dark stuff
Hmm.
just for the sake of it. Like I can't take horror, anything but the very mildest horror. I can't. Really dark stuff is hard. With the with most of the movies here, though, they do have their share of darkness, but they have other things too that sort of compensate isn't the right word, but that sort of help you through. Like that it's like not all dark all the time. Like The Apartment, for instance, gets into some pretty deep corruption, like corruption in the workplace,
Hmm.
that sort of thing, using women, exploiting women, like lots of dark things. But then there's also so much comedy. There's this really sweet, unconventional but sweet romance. There's, this terrific cast. Jack Lemmon is wonderful. And so there are things in each of these movies that sort of there's like a balance of light and dark, and when the dark gets you down, there's also some light things. Vertigo, for instance, is a beautiful movie to look at,
Hmm.
even as you're dealing with the darkness there. And there's Jimmy Stewart, who I mentioned is my favorite actor. So like his performances just always have so much in them that I love, even when he's not playing a great guy. So, or something like Amadeus. Again, there's some dark things, but there's also that glorious music, and there's this really cool, great cast, cool story. So there's always something to sort of get you through that you don't just feel like you're being traumatized by this
Yeah.
movie all the time. There's like really compelling things to sort of pull you along.
You mentioned The Apartment, and that's something Billy Wilder was so good at, is he could tell you a story that had, darkness in it, and sometimes really cynical, bleak movies. Like I love Ace in the Hole, but he could also do it in a manner that's very entertaining, very sweet in places. Yeah, no, and you also had Knives Out, which I mean, as dark as that, yeah, it's a murder movie, but it is also hilarious.
It
I
is. It
love
is
Knives
so
Out.
funny. I love the humor.
So, but when you're dealing with this and you're kind of dealing with heavier themes all the time as you're researching this, did you ever have a way where you're like, okay, I need to escape this a little bit. I need to brighten up. I need to put on Singing in the Rain or something like that.
I don't really remember many moments like that. If anything, there was just like the grind of writing a book, because it's always a
Hmm.
grind. And so
Yeah.
that I think sometimes made me want to escape a little bit sometimes. But I'm always like, I'm always putting TCM on. I'm always like, or grabbing a DVD or something, yay for physical media. And, or like I'm always watching like a mix of movies all the time. So that just following my usual habits, my usual routine, that was enough to give me plenty of lighter moments.
Now, we've mentioned a few times you love TCM, you love older films. Is there something about older films that speak to you more maybe than modern films? And is it just that we've had more time to live with these films and return to them, or is there something that maybe they were doing differently at that point?
Oh, I think there's a lot of factors. In the earlier days, like they were just, I think they were telling really great stories. They were learning how to tell stories on film.
Hmm.
And so there was a lot of interesting experimentation and things going on. So there was all that. I think now, as a child, I think one reason I got into classic movies that I can't ignore is that there was there were more age appropriate ones.
Sure.
There
Yeah.
and when you go back to the classics, a lot of times they are just by the nature of when they were made and how they were made. There's like less sex, violence, and profanity, all that. So, and that brings up the code that was in place for like from I think the mid 30s to the maybe early 60s,
Hmm.
and is very much maligned today. And I think the code was a double-edged sword, and I mention it in the book because I talk about how it had rules against showing interracial relationships, which is obviously very bigoted and bad. So yeah, there were things about the code that were terrible. And then on the other hand, you had like because certain things couldn't be shown on screen, an actress wouldn't be told that she had to take her top off or her career was over. So that there was a rule in place against that. So people actors are always going to be abused in Hollywood and in the movie industry in any era because people are sinful and fallen and exploit each other, unfortunately. But the code actually guarded against certain forms of exploitation for a while. So I'm not one of those people who say the code was all good, the code was all bad. It had good aspects and bad aspects. And one of the things is that without being able to show like everything on screen all the time, not just with sexuality, but also with violence and so forth, they had to use their imagination, they had to get around it. And sometimes they ended
Hmm.
up going deeper than they would otherwise, I think. An interesting book I read about the code is called, I'm trying to remember, I think it's called Better Left Unsaid by Nora Gilbert. I heard her speak at a conference one time and went out and got her book afterwards. And I recommend it because, like I say, the code was very, very polarizing. And there's the tendency overwhelmingly these days is to say that it was all bad. But she sort of touches on some of the neglected better aspects of it. So it's funny because you hear, I've sort of gone down the rabbit hole here, but just one more point. You hear people talk about pre-code movies and how women had much more freedom in those to do, to, to, uh, to show more dimensions of themselves, to do more things. And yes and no. I mean, I've watched my fair share of pre-codes, and some of them are just like flat out sexist.
Hmm.
So a code is not going to necessarily change hearts one way or the other, but it did put a system in place for a while that in order to sort of deal with some of these moral strictures, movies were doing some creative things and so, some good things that I think have stood the test of time. So that's my long-winded thoughts about that.
No, I think there's something to that as well, that when you are forced to find a creative solution, so when you have those, great art comes out of having boundaries, right? It comes from having kind of restrictions on what you can do, what you can't do. So the dialogue from a lot of those films pops in a way that, it doesn't pop when you just have 1,000 F bombs a minute because you can say it. That's a lazy way to get someone to laugh.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, you can go back and look at, again, Billy Wilder, who could write something that is savage and biting,
Mm-hmm.
and yet he has to find a creative way to do it without the way someone on the streets might do it, like that day. Like,
Yeah.
you got to say it without the four-letter words.
It's interesting you mentioned Billy Wilder because, and I'm sure he never would have agreed with this, but I think the code benefited him in particular because it reined him in a little bit. I've seen a bit of his postcode work, and it's just it. He sort of lets himself go in the mean-spirited direction, really. And as wonderful and well-rounded as a director as he could be, he sometimes had that streak in him, and without being without like a boundary in place, he sort of let himself go in that direction too much, and the movie was just not great. And so he had, I mean, the Code era, like with The Apartment, as we've talked about, with Sunset Boulevard, with a lot of those others, Some Like It Hot, he found a better balance for his cynical instincts and his his lighter side. I don't know if I want to say that, but his better angels maybe. He found more of a balance. He could be that well-rounded person because he had a few boundaries in place. Wherever he is, he's probably cursing me right now. But I do think it's true. You just look at the quality of his work in the different eras, and you can see it.
Yeah, yeah. No, I totally agree. Writing for people of faith. I don't know if you had the same experience I had growing up that we talked about earlier, where there were years in my life where if a Christian suggested, hey, there's a spiritual lesson to be gained from this movie, it was kind of, no, don't say that. Like, movies in particular were really hands off. My dad, I've told this story a lot. My dad was a deacon when I was about 10 years old, and he signed a form saying we would not go to the movie theater.
Mm.
So when you're approaching writing about film from a faith perspective, if you find people who are hesitant, how do you encourage them to maybe take the start and encourage film as a way to maybe affect their thinking, or that it can be something that is helpful on a spiritual walk?
Well, I think you kind of ease them into it. Like you start maybe with films that like everybody can enjoy and get into, and then maybe sort of ease them along into like different kinds of movies and more into the deep end, if you will.
Mhm.
A movie that comes to mind is The Sound of Music, and I think I touched on this very briefly in the book. Singing nuns, singing children, all this stuff. It's fun, and it airs like every Christmas, or is it Easter? I forget, but it airs every year, one of the big holidays, and it's it's the ultimate family friendly experience, right? But I mean, there are Nazis, and
Mhm.
there's a man who has to make a choice about whether he's going to collaborate and cooperate, or just give up his whole life and take his family on the run. And so in that seemingly most innocuous of settings, you get to think about some of those things. And we tend to, and this goes along with what I write about. Everybody tends to think, well, obviously I wouldn't go along with the Nazis because, they were bad. Well, do we know if we were plunked down in the middle of that situation, if it was easier to just go along, if we had a family to support, all these things, do we know what we would do, not having the benefit of hindsight like our era has? Do we know what we would do? So just you bring out a movie like that, you ask a few questions, you think a little bit, and you're sort of, I think, training yourself, disciplining yourself, start thinking about these things in more detail, and then maybe to handle some more complex movies.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to start. It's funny. My dad always, whenever I would try and talk to him about a movie, I don't go to a movie to think, Chris. I don't go to a movie to think. I'm like, but I know I've talked to you about movies where you've come out saying, like, we saw Remember the Titans together, and he comes out thinking about issues of race and things like that. I'm like, it is there. Don't be afraid to engage a movie.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, I think that's really good. So I'm assuming most of these films had to be subsequent watches, where you've seen these all before you sat down to write about them, correct?
I'm trying to remember. There might have, when I was going through, like, okay, which movies do I want to write about? I think Yeah, I remember now. When I was putting my list together, I actually had not yet seen The Birth of a Nation or Within Our Gates. But as I was thinking through this project and what I wanted to talk about, what I wanted to say, it sort of came to me. I think I want to do something along these lines. I want to sort of take a couple of movies that show like where filmmakers' heads were at one particular time, where audiences' heads were, what was offered to them, and what they made of it, and like if there was something really bad out there, what else was there that was offering an alternate voice, and so that's how I ended up watching The Birth of a Nation and Within Our Gates, because I knew enough about, I had heard enough about them to know that I thought they would be valuable to help me say some things that I wanted to say. So those were new. I think most of the others I had seen multiple times, as you say.
So, of the films you had seen many times before, was there something that struck you and surprised you in particular about one movie?
Yeah, In the Heat of the Night comes to mind. If you recall, in that chapter, I talk about the moment that for me is the heart of the movie, and it wasn't the moment that I thought it was going to be. It wasn't the moment that most people would think it was going to be, because if you know the movie at all, you know the slap. That's like
Hmm.
the big moment. Sidney Poitier gets slapped, he slaps right back.
Right.
And that was earth shaking in the 60s. And I talk about that a good deal. And I say why it was earth shaking and why it's so important. But the focus, the movie is so much about the black detective's relationship with the white sheriff, or the white police officer, and the heart of their relationship, and all the flaws that are in that are exposed in that moment when they're together in in the white guy's living room, and they're bearing their souls to each other, and then it's like they touch a live wire, and
Hmm.
instantly something explodes. I say explodes, that's too dramatic, but instantly there's a shift, and it's like a door closes, like, no, you can't go there, you can't say that. I can't identify with you that much.
Yeah. 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 There's this
And,
friendship that's budding, but he can't admit, no, we're the same.
yeah, and it's so tragic. And the whole, when you look at it, it's like the whole movie has been leading there in a way, because Sidney Poitier hopped off this train in this southern town where he is immediately suspected, people giving him the side eye just for being who he is, just for being a black man, and arrested for murder almost right off the bat. So it's it's just, this whole atmosphere is steeped in racism, and he's just trying to survive, trying to function, trying to do a good job in it. And there's this suspicion everywhere, and there's this "you're not like us" feeling everywhere, and so we're automatically gonna suspect you. And Rod Steiger's character is just so thrown by him. He's trying to work with him. He's pulling back. He's softening. He's pulling back. He's softening. He's pulling back. This whole thing, and and that moment, like I said, in his living room, just lays it bare, and it makes you so sad. It's such a quick moment, and that's one reason why it's good to watch movies many times, and
Hmm.
it was good for me to watch it so carefully, to write this chapter about it, because I saw it in a way that I never had before. I saw, oh, this is this is the fundamental flaw. This is what's keeping them from becoming real friends, and it's so sad, but the movie shows it to you so honestly, and it's good for us to see that. And then later, when they have a little reconciliation of sorts, it they end up in like a nice place, but you can't forget what came before. You have to sort of live with that. You have to sit with it and not just dismiss it because it still affects everything, and it's important. And we have to know that about ourselves. We have to know we have that potential in us to to um to automatically just assume I'm better than you or whatever, and sometimes without even realizing we're doing it, in order to repent of it, to learn to start to learn to change. We have to be able to see it, to know that it's there, to try to get past it, to try to transcend it.
You mentioned Birth of a Nation and Within Our Gates. I have not seen Within Our Gates, but I have seen Birth of a Nation many, many years ago. And it is one of those things where when you try and describe it to people who haven't seen it, it's shocking how blatantly racist and bad
Oh
that
yeah.
movie is. I love the idea in that chapter of contrasting one movie with another.
Mhm.
Um, why did you choose to take that approach to that chapter?
Well, like I was saying before, I wanted to talk about. I wanted to sort of do something a little different. I wanted to say, okay, we get offered like all kinds of movies from directors, from filmmakers that give us their take on the world, their point of view, and so forth, and we absorb it, and half the time we don't even know what we're absorbing, or we're not aware, or we take what we're given, we take what
Mm-hmm.
we're offered. And back in the day, way back when movies were first becoming a big deal, there was this one, Birth of a Nation, um, that was being offered, and people, I mean, it was screened by the president. It was,
Mm-hmm.
it helped revive the Klan. So I mean, this thing had this thing made an impact, and it had effects. And we tend to look back. I think sometimes, especially people who haven't seen the movie and have only heard about it, people look back and say, "Oh, they didn't know any better." Well, but there was this black man, Oscar Micheaux, making movies, and he made a movie called Within Our Gates, and he made a lot of other movies like it. And he was right there to say, "Oh no, this is not right. This is not how it is. The world is not full of these innocent white victims cowering helplessly before the evil, black snidely whiplashes or whatever. It's not like that. This is what the world is really like. Here is what black people are really like." He was making movies to say that. So I'm sort of comparing and contrasting these two to show you can't just look back and say people didn't know any better than to be racist back then, because what was it, 1915, 1916, I can't remember, but around then. You can't say that they didn't know any better back then, because here were other voices. Maybe not as popular, but they were there. They were out there, and they were saying, "No, this isn't right. This isn't right. This is wrong." And so, it bears remembering that in any era, we can know better if we want to. If there are pervasive voices in our culture saying, bad is good, up is down, wrong is right, all this stuff, don't just take what you're offered. Especially if your conscience is, telling you this isn't right, look around, see that there are other voices out there, reinforcing what is right and telling you what is good, and be aware of them, look for them, listen for them. And that's what I sort of wanted to get at when I was writing that.
I love that idea of using one movie to contrast another one. Real World Theology used to do a series called If These Films Could Talk, and it was like
Yeah.
two films in conversation with each other. And I've often thought, I remember, when God's Not Dead came out, and everyone I talked to was asking me, "Have you seen that? Have you seen that? Have you seen that?" And I'm like, "I have, but you're not going to like my answer." and so what I finally started going is, well, I didn't really love that, but I did see the Blue Like Jazz adaptation that came out like a year after, which isn't a perfect movie by any means, but I'm like, but that's a really interesting take also about a Christian suddenly being in a atmosphere that they are not used to, and I think it shows a much more interesting way to interact with each other. There's a whole book that could be like those two, two different films in conversation. I love that idea. I that was my favorite chapter of the whole thing.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad you
I
liked it.
really like that, and it makes me realize I had known of Oscar Micheaux, but I have not seen any of his movies, and I think Criterion Channel has them on there a few times a year, so I should probably check those out.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a great documentary about him too, that airs on TCM sometimes. And maybe Criterion has it too, I don't know. Um, but it's worth looking for because it will sort of introduce you to him and his thought and his movies, and then you can sort of go from there.
I'll have to check that out. So final question. Let's look ahead and say theoretically you decide to do a sequel to this book, down the road. Who are some filmmakers or some movies that right now you're already thinking, man, I wish I could explore this in more detail. These people are doing interesting work in this space.
Well, I had to give that some serious thought. I wrote about Knives Out, and I don't think I could possibly escape doing Wake Up Dead Man
Oh
for
my gosh, I love
the
that
same
movie.
series because it's a wonderful movie. I've already written for Christ and Pop Culture about it. Um, and that is not to throw stones at Glass Onion, the second one in the series, because it was good in its own way. But Glass Onion seemed to me like it was on such an enormous scale. Like, I mean, just what if you think about just the climax of that movie alone, everything was like bells and whistles and
Hmm.
pyrotechnics and fancy and I like I like Johnson best when he's just with these movies at least when he's sort of keeping a tight focus on this little group of people who are not involved in pyrotechnics and bells and whistles but dealing with like some of the stuff of like everyday life and the jealousies and the prejudices and all these things. And I just loved so much of the stuff he did with Wake Up Dead Man. It was, I mean, just the faith angle alone was so interesting.
Yeah.
So I would have to do something with that. I thought of doing something with the Social Network. I thought of doing something with The Dark Knight Rises. Those were some movies that didn't make the cut, but I maybe they would make a sequel if I did a sequel. One I just saw recently that I was fascinated by was The Aviator,
Oh
uh,
yeah, yeah.
about Howard Hughes. It's excuse me. It's such a well-made movie. It's so interesting, but there's this there's this sequence where Hughes, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, is testifying before Congress. You probably remember it. And that's where the movie started feeling really off to me because I was thinking, no, you are trying to squeeze him into the hero mode.
Hmm.
Howard Hughes is not a hero. And you could see the movie doing this. I mean, we know this trope so well, the heroic outsider underdog, fighting for his life in front of Congress. Like, hello, Mr. Smith goes to Washington.
Hmm.
We've known this trope since the 1930s or maybe before. And this is not Howard Hughes. You cannot make him a hero because he was not. He was an interesting man. He was, he had a lot of accomplishments, but he is not one of the good guys. And you just can't do that with him. So I think that movie would be like tailor made for an approach like this, where you can look at what the movie does right and what it does and where it goes off the rails, because this character that we followed for so long, we can sense, we know that he's not a hero, and being asked to look at him like one, we just know that this isn't right. This isn't how it's supposed to go.
I feel like Scorsese, man, there's like a wealth of material there. Taxi Driver alone I mean, that's one that still burrows into me. I love Taxi Driver, even though it is one of those ones that makes me deeply uncomfortable every time I watch
Yeah.
it. Um, no, those are all good ones. I would read all of those. So why don't you tell people where they can purchase The Screen in the Mirror?
Well, you can get it, as the saying goes, wherever you buy books. Amazon has it. Heartsandmindsbooks.com has it for 20% off, which I want to put out there because they are such a great bookstore. Byron Borger, who runs it, has been so kind and helpful in promoting this and other books that I've done. He does a great job. He ships very fast and packages very well. I mean, he does great things with book selling, and he is offering it for 20% off. So that's at heartsandmindsbooks.com. But I have to say he's only got the paperback. So if you want the ebook, I believe you do have to go to Amazon. Bookshop or bookshop.com or .org. I've forgotten. Darn it. Well, Bookshop has the paperback, but also I don't think they have the ebook yet. So, if you want it for Kindle, you have to go to Amazon, but if you want the paperback, you have more options.
And we'll put all those links in the show notes too. I also want to recommend your Substack, Dear Strange Things. I love the book reviews you are doing on there, so I would recommend people give that a subscribe. Gina, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. I highly recommend this book. I love this book. Thank you for taking the time to talk, and I look forward to seeing what comes next.
Thank you so much. It's been really fun.